We make art out of necessity. We buy food out of necessity. We buy clothes out of necessity.
I'm 45 years old now. I would say that for at least 39 of those 45 years, I've lived under an apartheid situation.
I think I was born in the struggle, and I'll die in a struggle also.
We're still fighting the system as black people.
I think the cards are stacked against black artists.
Because South Africa isn't a very easy place for black people. It's like historically 300 years of oppression, and apartheid is not going to fly out of the window after 9 years.
It's the same thing happening. People are still being set free and say you new South Africans, but you're still apprentices of the masters.
Apartheid was the politics of space. So now, if we say we're free, then we have to work towards reclaiming these spaces.
There are no people who are prepared at the moment to stand up and question, for example, to question universities, to question like colleges, to question galleries. I'm talking about institutions that run the art business, the market itself.
I would say that the main problem is, although apartheid has dissolved in a formal sense, it's no longer legislated, there is still a social apartheid.
Unfortunately, the art world is very much a white world as far as the media goes, the gallery system goes, as far as institutions go.
You know, increasingly we hear about a two-nation country, a black nation and a white nation, and that we have to strive to be one nation.
But you dare not call me a colored, I'm African.
And so here we are, sitting with these labels. The journey has ended, but our luggage is still labeled.
Was problematic for us at the time. It was something that we all really rejected as a Western thing, you know, as a Western invention.
The norm in our collective minds as white South Africans is that the artist, the Platonic artist, is white.
Black artists are finding it very difficult. I mean, I think they are in a position where they first of all, don't have a voice, a platform, and they're not part of institutions where things are developing.
So the black artist then becomes the special category, a kind of curiosity, and I think in the South African mind, a step down from the white artist. But as I said before, these are unconscious assumptions.
And it seems that one has to get into character, and one then has to perform being black.
If you're a white artist and you're doing your work and you're seen as an artist or a South African artist instead of a black artist or black South African artist or township artist, all those. You know, I know all these issues have been touched on, but there's still a problem even now.
I find it quite burdensome in a way to engage on this level, because what has been natural until now has now been reified in such a way that arriving somewhere, arriving anywhere, becomes, one gets to be on a kind of a stage.
The skins become analogies of myself, the trouble that I'm a scored skin, everything I'm dissected, I'm bent, everything on me. It's this kind of really difficult life.
And another reason why black is not sent out on these issues, we have marginalized ourselves as well, which is another responsibility we must take as black artists, because we've been made to be dependent. We've been made to be dependent.
At the same time, I think we, as black artists, as black academics, as black activists, we also need to start fighting these issues. Well, you know, you can count on your one hand how many women of color there are in a contemporary sense in South Africa.
People are not interested. There are people here, I would say more than 300 years, white people have been here and they're not interested to learn our languages. And they can't spell our names, they can't say them properly. It means they don't care. You know, what is the worst thing that you can do to a person? What was the worst thing that was done to the slaves who were taken to the Americas? Is that they were stripped, they were given new names. You know, so the sound of your name, first of all, is like, yeah, if someone says it right, it means they care about who you are and they make an effort to learn your language.
I think that's why apartheid worked so well, is because people started to believe that they were coloured or that they were Indian. I've never seen myself as a coloured person.
Black is a state of mind. I think we all need to divest ourselves of these kind of framing devices.
So politically it was important to say that the majority of people were oppressed in this country, and it was on the basis of colour.
Because for me, that is very important, you know, like to debate these terms, you know, because they are not like just as words as they are, you know, like they've got this baggage with them, you know.
We need to talk about black and coloured and white.
Issues of race have a particular configuration in South Africa, but it manifests itself in many different places. So from that point of view, it was also interesting to open up the debate around blackness. And also I think that in South Africa, these issues have not been theorized and written about as much as they have in Britain or in the States.
Black then, or township art, if you look at that history, it had a political significance. It carried a certain weight, you know, which was a reaction, a resistance against a system, a force that was keeping our life.
There you definitely have a black artist, because a white artist would never choose to address those particular themes in that particular way.
I suppose the problem is that, you know, maybe people are looking for very hackneyed forms of blackness, and when they meet something that it's not so, you know, so clear cut, it's a big problem.
So the Colour Me series looks and is a play specifically on the classification of coloured, and in a way just turning it on its head by presenting myself in colours which are totally imaginary or, you know, filled with fantasy, red, yellow, brown.
I don't think, on the other hand, that particular styles attached to particular racial identities. I don't think there is such a thing as black art.
It's read in a, it becomes a big issue for people, because if there's a black body in there, then the black body is not viewed in the same way that any other body is viewed. That means, and you know, the white body.
I think the you know, black expression has you know, long since passed through that particular phase of being revelatory.
If I'm I'm working with my own body, I explore the things which are comfortable for me, and if that is not black, then I suppose that I'm not black.
So the importance of black as a debate is just to further debate. It is to mobilize, others, who are on the periphery, who are marginalized, who are also marginalizing themselves, to become conscious,
So on the question of, do I embrace that word or not? If that word, it has to do with better my situation and to interrogate, to be able to interrogate that sender as well, I'll embrace that word like black.
When we start to chart blackness in relation to institution, it's for that reason, that political reason, to change the institution, to make them representative of different cultural diversities. So that's how I see it, for me, the significance of black. Not so much of black as a color, but black as a political, agenda. And one of my concerns, I don't think it should be only a responsibility solely of black.
The artists from the Cape Town area, black artists, some of them, decided to form a little arts body, creative arts body called Vakalisa.
I dedicated myself completely to Vakalisa.
And Vakalisa, it's just the call to wake up.
These are the first people that I met in Cape Town, who I could say were like fellow artists.
So I was one of a group called Vakalisa who went into the townships and would show in a township venue like a library, even a creche, a church hall. We would put up a collection of artworks and photographs, and on a certain night we would read poetry and have musical performances.
The audience would be people who would come to community libraries and community centers for functions. A lot of the Vakalisa exhibitions was linked to political events of the time.
It's just that we did not want whites into Vakalisa. And the reason is that whites have had the opportunity for education. They've had they had all the contacts, and we were just feared that it would be inevitable for them to dominate because of the skills and the advantage that they have in so many fields, that we wanted to do something for ourselves.
We need a place where we can just engage with institutional control issues. I put forward the name BLAC. I said, look, we need something catchy that will get people going. Let's call it the Black Arts Collective. And the Black Arts Collective, in a sense, we're interrogating what is black. We'd be interrogating what is arts. We'd be interrogating what is a collective, a group of people coming together. So we made this decision to keep BLAC an all-black organization. It had to do with the fact that we were just a bit pissed off that there were all these opportunities for these inclusive groups, like CAP or whatever, where white artists or cultural or practitioners come in. They're a lot more articulate, and they have a lot of things to say, and they take control of the direction of a project. And I've seen this year in and year out in all the projects I've been involved in.
We've been situated in a place that's been called black, underprivileged and all that stuff, and we suffered because we've been situated in a certain place. So out of that, through kind of trying to find ways of resisting that oppression and suppression, we ended up embracing that kind of term and situation where we are called blacks, a township. So we become like kind of created our own kind of enclave to repel this force that's really oppressive. So we had to find a united front where we have to rally against the name black as opposed to white.
I don't see any problem in having an exclusively black organization, because I think there are so many organizations that are all white, and the only difference is that they don't have white in front of it.
And the currents of black today, if you really look at it, it's a reaction against a particular dominant force. It's not something that is normal or is natural. It's just a form of a political stance. So by speaking black, we are not only like making ourselves self-conscious, empowering ourselves, but also we are kind of unveiling the ignorance of whiteness. As far as qualification or knowledge, because South Africa has positioned black in a situation whereby blacks, they don't have access to knowledge. Not that they're not intelligent, it's just they don't have access.
Growing up in Port Elizabeth and going to PE schools, there was no such thing as art at schools. Absolutely nothing.
It wasn't as if I knew when I was growing up that I wanted to be an artist. I had no family, no aunties, no uncles, no cousins who were artists. There were no role models.
For a person with an art degree and you're a black artist, there's really nothing out there. One of the things that I wanted to do is, of course, teach art. But of course, now, as a black person, you couldn't teach at white schools. And there was no art at schools, in black schools.
So all those years of being in the township school, no arts education on the curriculum, never go into an art gallery, do you know what I mean? All those kind of things. The schools should be doing it, don't get me wrong. The schools should be doing it, but the plain truth is that they're not, the majority of the time.
I think, the structural solution is to like revisit the whole secondary school curricula, and there needs to be a kind of a sea change in the way in which the education department thinks about art and culture.
Institutions are now moving into this new technical fields where, community artists are still sitting there and creating things physically with their hands, painting with a brush, where people are now painting in front of a computer, doing things on a keyboard.
One needs space in order to prepare a portfolio. One needs access to materials, something to sharpen a pencil with. Access to the pencil, access to a bit of flat space which is not the cooking surface in the family home, where one can prepare the drawings to get into architecture school, to get into the fine arts school. And this is of course lacking in most black households.
So I was like the first so-called black art student at Rhodes University. I could enter the institution, but I had to apply for what they called a permit. They used that word, a permit, and on the basis that there was no art at the black university, so I could attend university.
I don't come from a college or a university, so my college or university was like haunting the libraries, eating up the books,
So I think black artists still work under an enormous disadvantage relative to their white counterparts. And this is sort of evident in many ways.
When you haven't had you don't even know the language of the system. You don't even know the little tricks to open the first door, or you don't even know what to ask for. You don't even know what the question is. But you know you have something that you must do. You have something inside that needs to come out.
And no, because in a sense what's happening now is that if you're a black artist, then you have to go somewhere else first before you come to university. Something has to happen between school and university, so it becomes like a bridging course or an access route, an access college, you know, bringing, inverted commas, black students up to speed. Talking about CAP as a conduit into Michaelis, I think the relationship has been enormously beneficial, certainly to the university.
The official version is that we train visual and performing artists from the so-called historically disadvantaged communities. And we provide a bridge, an access bridge into careers, into jobs, into further training.
It's like a university, Yaboni Cape, for a black artist, especially up here Western Cape.
In a sense, what CAP has managed to do has been to, you know, in most cases, to take young artists, young students who have not had exposure to art education or art training at school level, and as young adults to have inculcated in them a love of the métier and an ability to work with different media and to express themselves formally through paint or through form or through line.
I think I see it in all those kinds of ways. I see it as offering a kind of safe space for people who've, you know, been up against it, literally, you know, at a personal level, economically, socially, in all sorts of different ways, who've felt excluded, who've been left out, who've so it's a safe space.
So the kind of, you know, the group of artists who've come to Michaelis prepared, as it were, by CAP, have, I think, all done incredibly well.
And I think what part of our role is to, from a marginal perspective, marginalised perspective, from an oppositional perspective, is to make sure they understand what the dominant discourse is, and then choose. Choose to join it, choose to reject it, choose to coexist with it, whatever.
I-institution yokuqala ebalulekileyo ndingathi yi-CAP, ngoba zonke ii-artists seziphumelele nje ziyi-product yase-CAP.
But I think the very fact that we exist and have existed for this period is a challenge to those institutions out there, to the mainstream. One of the things that really moves me about working in a place like this is to see students who have had none of those things and still something is inside, something burns inside them, something makes them get up the next morning, trek 25 kilometres to a rundown old church building and start all over again. And I'm getting all tearful about it, but it's that's what big part of what motivates me. It's them, you know.
Let's just speak from my experience as the former director of the Michaelis School of Fine Art. That fine art department is part of the University of Cape Town, and the university has a declared policy of transforming.
There hasn't been pressure brought to bear on these institutions to change.
The issue of institutional culture and institutional racism, I think is something which just, you know, it has to be confronted and has to be worked through. There's no doubt that it does exist.
I think that it can be a very daunting environment to be in. I certainly found it quite daunting. And that is, again, not to dismiss the positive things that have come out of there, but at an institution in which I was, which was predominantly white, in which I was one or two of the only people of color there.
So in my first year we arrived, there were only 5 blacks among 65 students.
Look at the drama department, for example. You find it's almost 50% black. So I find that a bit strange, that in one art that can happen, in the other section, especially the visual art section, it doesn't really happen.
We haven't sat back and done nothing about it. We have mounted numerous campaigns and programs to try and redress that issue.
One of the students' comments was that there wasn't one black lecturer, in first year. And besides that, I mean, there isn't any black lecturers at Michaelis at present. I mean, besides myself, and then my identification is also being a colored.
It's lamentable. It's outrageous that blacks are underrepresented on the staff of art schools in South Africa. We actually need to have a lot more black undergraduates coming through, and a lot more of these graduates like succeeding within the stipulated time period and going on to doing postgraduate work, and then coming back onto the staff.
So right through, from the 5 of us, I was the only one who finished within that period.
Because the problems are so unique, problems of the black students, like it's financial exclusion. That's one thing, is really finance. It's all around like finance.
I managed to do it. It was difficult for me to be there because I never really had any art formal education before, and for the first time at university level, it was my first time to kind of be able to identify and say you have different variations and tones of pencils.
I couldn't understand most of the things that were taught in the class, I found that the lecturer was like very quick in addressing issues or addressing whatever he was teaching, and I felt uncomfortable. I felt like too much of an outsider, and I thought most of the times I would just like take my bag and leave, go to my hostel, and I wouldn't know what to ask if I had to go forward and say, listen, I don't understand. If they were to ask me, what is it that you don't understand? I didn't know what I didn't understand.
They pass the studio work subjects, but they never pass history of art, and they never pass any other subject which is a requirement for the degree. And that means they take longer to do the degree.
And most of the time I find that sometimes it's not because you don't understand. Sometimes it's because you are not being accommodated.
So Michaelis made me to go to that saying black man, you are on your own, It really made me feel like that, as a black, I'm on my own, you see.
They're all, you could be at the same institution, but by and large, socially and culturally, you were apart from it,
Not even a single one who ever showed interest in kind of understanding my language.
There is definitely a feeling that students feel alienated from the staff, they feel alienated from the institution, they feel alienated from the student body.
For instance, in my latest project, I think it was really difficult for my art lecturers and all that stuff, and people who were around the Michaelis by the time, to really understand my work. Not only the theme itself, but the execution of the work, So it was kind of different from what they've been seeing produced.
The unfortunate thing is this, as South Africans, living under apartheid and before that colonial rule. And so the Africans, our wagon was never hitched to Africa. Our wagon was hitched to Europe. So we knew everything, and we still know everything about European artists. The Picassos and everything, we know all of that. We go back to the Greeks, to the Romans, and we go on from there, and very little about Africa.
It just bounced back again to the art history question. Why there was so minimally like South African black art. We spend the rest of the course, like maybe 80% or 75% Europe. When we come to Africa, we're talking about Berlin sculptures, those more traditional stuff. Nothing of contemporary Africa or South Africa.
The problem is not, in my opinion, the universities. The problem lies at government level. There have been enough years to do something about it. We have not had any new black recruits coming up through the secondary school system, primarily because, in my opinion again, the government has incorrectly assessed the educational and liberatory role of creative expression.
We have very few enlightened black people to talk about art making in South Africa.
Where is South Africa's Okwe Onwenzo? Where is South Africa's Oliagwibe?
Because most of the literature I was reading, it was mostly European.
It's like a small bit of colonialism in a way, because they were really imposing Western ideas of criticism on an African process, and they weren't dealing with it on that sort of very important level, you know.
Right through my art history, I hope Sandra will see this document someday, or Michael Godby. I never have a sense of dissenting voice in my undergraduate, other than just to learn the history of art, from modernism or from Renaissance to modern art and so forth, abstract art, minimalism and all that. There was no sense of discourses that were counteracting those movements.
How can Africans now be African after Picasso?
And I think one of the problems about writing about so-called black art in this country is no set of criteria has ever been evolved for examining it. What you bring to bear on it is something absolutely alien to it, and those are Western criteria.
If you come out of a university today, whether you're black or white, you are still trained in Western art history. But it is critical that we have the black voice, the black interpretation, the black person writing the text.
Where you find maybe colonial thoughts or schools of thinking placed upon black art.
And I think in a country like South Africa, which is such a pluralistic kind of society, to adopt one standard, one paradigm, and apply it across the board is in a way a subtle form of racism.
Is it not a problem that all these aspects of research and documentation, right, has always been in the hands of white people? It surely means that you never have a perfect understanding of, you never have a holistic view.
We have people like David Kolwane making such an impact internationally because he's one of the very few South African black artists who can speak articulately.
I decided, okay, there are no black writers. If I don't write, there's no one. I encountered David Kolana's writings, you know. I find David is saying so many things, very interesting, you know. But yet, there's more needs to be said, you know. There's a need for more voices.
I need to accompany my work with writings, you know, like, so that whatever, like, kind of like, okay, engagement, you know, like, we involve, people should engage with me through my writings, you know, because of this whole lot of this misrepresentation.
That is my hope, that there will be more people who write about, you know, actually more black people writing about art in South Africa.
And one of the issues that came up was this lack of African, you know, writers, you know, dealing with African, you know, issues.
You know, installation we've done that long time ago. Conceptual art we've done long time ago. It's just a question of how we play with semantics as far as the language is concerned. Art and artifacts, art and craft. Those are all just political used rhetoric terms, you know, just to create that binary opposite. Those binary opposite of, like, you know, superior, inferior.
So, yes, I think the nomenclature that people have come up with is totally invalid, and it's time that black art was looked at again in a much more rigorous critical spirit.
Well, hence, like, we find most of community artists, township art, their names are erased. They don't exist as individuals or as people. They exist as black artists. So black artists with no name, you know. And to erase someone's individuality, to erase someone's identity, you know. And for me, we come on earth as individuals.
What does the term township artist mean? What could it possibly mean? Does it mean an artist who's resident in a township? Does it mean an artist who paints scenes of a township? And these scenes of township life are painted in such a wide variety of styles, and have been for a very, very long time. I mean, township art first emerged in the late 40s, early 50s, so we're talking about half a centuries of production. How can all these works be labelled township art? The term becomes so broad as to be absolutely meaningless, doesn't it?
I don't understand what's township art, because there's nothing called urban art. If there was township art by that time, I would think, because there was always this binary opposition between black and white, if township art was the art that was produced by black artists in the townships, I suppose there must be urban art or something like that, or town art that was produced by white artists, you know.
Township, the word township was never a problem for me until it became like a thing that was like in the art circles. You know, suddenly it became an issue.
So it's not really a geographical space, a location or whatever, it's a mind-setted kind of thing that was imposed.
So it has always been seen as a foster child of what white artists were doing.
They are expected to have, you know, an identifiable black or African content, otherwise they are relegated to the scrap heap.
Once we start to wear these terms and inherit them without questioning them, we remain on that position of being dominated, of being kept hostage, you know, of not growing.
Because the very term black artist seems to imply that there's some repertoire of themes or of techniques or of stylistic traits that they all share. But I think this is a complete fallacy.
There are exceptions, so there are many exceptions.
The work that was coming out of the Tupelo workshop was perceived by the critics to be abstract. They used the word abstract. And of course, abstract is like an American concept.
I was the one that said to him, abstract art for me has no relevance to our life, to the struggle, what we're going through.
And the criticism was that here were black artists coming out of township situations, and here they're painting, you know, paintings like Jackson Pollock, you know, or beautiful colors, and, you know, how could they do this? This is not right, this is not art.
But today I freed myself and become free by saying, if one fights for the freedom of oppression, then one automatically must fight for the freedom of expression.
So my interest in art history is not something I thought I would be doing. I always saw myself just a practicing artist. But I saw myself going to art history as a need to fill a gap, as a need to create a forum or a space whereby other voices could start to emerge.
There were certain buildings that was, I mean, because of our apartheid policies, just didn't, kind of invite people in, And I mean, there was also policies that you couldn't go into certain buildings.
Although the gallery was never closed in terms of visitors to black members of our population, unlike the performing arts centres and the theatres and the cinemas and so on. Of course, it still looks like a difficult for anybody who may be walking up the gardens to look at the building. There's still something that doesn't invite people, the person in the street, to come in.
I think it was taken for granted that if you were not white, you had no business going into certain buildings. And so people who were not white did not go into certain buildings.
I mean, I used to go there and look at the works there, and I enjoyed that. But now of late, I once went there and I had a problem there. I had to cough up some money to get inside.
I lost the battle of free access to the museum some years ago. I still have a free Sunday. I don't know how, so I encourage people to come when it's free. Don't know how long that is going to last. That was a very sad moment.
And even now that everybody can walk in, so to speak, people need to pay.
Because we have to accept that only a small part of our population will ever be physically, financially, in every way be able to come here to see what we have to offer. So we have to take things increasingly out to the population.
The gallery holds the artistic patrimony of the nation. So within a national gallery, you should find specimens of the entire course of South African art, right from the earliest beginnings to the current day. And one's expectation when one goes to a national gallery is that this will be on exhibition. Now, unfortunately, this is where our national gallery falls down.
And then, of course, it has a history of colonialism, and while there was never a policy of discriminating against black artists, we have to recognize that the first work by a black artist was acquired in 1968, the Gerard Sekulture, which was 20 years after he left the country.
But it wasn't strange at that time not to see the works of black artists. But it was a revelation then to discover Sekulture. Suddenly, in the midst of this encounter with the National Gallery, suddenly there was Sekulture in the newspaper. And here was, for me, a light burning in the dark.
That's why we still have a very long list of artists whose work was not acquired. And we're now looking at ways and means of dealing with that so that we fill those critical gaps. So that is going to take a very long time.
Something like a national gallery has a role to play, in as much as their duty as a national gallery, the very term itself, implies that they should look at the art of all the indigenous people in South Africa, be they white, be they coloured, be they black, be they Indian, and do it justice and make some kind of attempt to understand it on its own terms.
There have been a lot of great black artists, but you don't find them in the National Gallery. Maybe they're in the collection, but you don't find them exhibited. They're not being advertised.
At the moment, I see a very few people, a very few black or colored artists on that list, and so you don't see their work in the national museums or national galleries.
What is so sad for me about the South African National Gallery? I mean, where do you see the local work of the black people, like black artists in Cape Town? Just their work.
It would be interesting, it would be very nice, it would be greatly appreciated if I was invited to exhibit there. Because if they decide to have a retrospective of my work at the National Gallery after I'm dead, this ghost is going to hang around there for a long, long time. I have more work of mine in overseas collections than in South African collections.
And it means that if you don't have any money left for acquisitions, that is the function that has to be sacrificed.
Commercial galleries cannot do it because commercial galleries, their whole raison d'etre is to make a profit. The National Gallery can't do it because it's underfunded, although they use that excuse for all their shortcomings.
I mean, institutions do need to look at themselves a lot more carefully and reflect on what's been happening and how it's been working with its stakeholders, etc.
I mean, we also want to be part of the National Gallery.
Okay, I think it's necessary for people to be reflected in. I mean, if the institution, a cultural institution reflects a set of ideas and visions. And if it is purely one set of middle class values, particularly, and class has become quite important, and at the same time doesn't include other cultural values as well, so it's class and culture, and race tends to be a carrier of a lot of cultural values in South Africa. And if it doesn't reflect those values, rather than the color of skin or the degree or where you come from, if it doesn't reflect a range of those things, it's not going to be an efficient institution.
Well, transformation means, first of all, that we have to transform ourselves, and that is an ongoing process.
And I find that difficult at the moment with institutions because a lot of the leadership is from an older era with a set of cultural values that are not necessarily completely shifted.
When you look at all the museums around the country, they are run by elderly white women who are just about to retire and who've been there for years and years.
You'd go to Durban Art Gallery, the director is white. You come to Johannesburg Art Gallery, the director is white. You come to the National Art Gallery, the director and the curators are white.
Nelson Mandela said he would never go into any of these institutions because he just feels the objects they have inside those institutions are foreign to him. So until the day when he can feel comfortable in a museum and see objects that reflect his culture, he'll never feel comfortable with any museum.
The curatorial process is a powerful process. No matter how we address it and how the curator in the end decides what is going to be shown and how it's going to be shown. And it is to have that voice as an equal voice within an organization, and a voice that can take decisions about a voice that comes with a different background, with different ideas, with different experiences.
If at the moment there's no black curators around here, there should be ways to attract curators.
You get people that feel very bad about black people not having a voice. They feel very bad. I understand them. They feel very bad. They feel they can do something about black people not having a voice. What do they do about it? They speak for them.
But of course we know that our museums have also been influenced by what the universities do, what the market actually demands. But this is how they buy.
I know of exhibitions where there would be a moan about nobody's been here from the National Gallery yet, and the exhibition would close and they'd still be waiting for somebody to come from the National Gallery in the same way that they wait for Godot.
So I don't know what are the terms of quality in work, what is discussed when the board comes and say, okay, we're purchasing work. I don't know what's the criteria. Is it the name?
What happens now, presently, is that the responsibility is on the artist to make the effort towards the gallery and the curator, instead of the curator the other way. Now, it might sound very simplistic, but my few experiences in overseas countries is that there is this inquisitive nature about curators.
One would like to see in a museum that the lifestyles of people represented, but ultimately we're looking for quality work. And this should be the criteria for me.
See, I would say that this notion of quality is very much quality as judged by a very narrow and selective white frame of reference. So you're saying this is not quality because it does not conform to our white or international standards.
Black should take a proper position. That is visibility and presence and recognition and respect. It is at that point then one is going to speak of these very exciting terms: diversity, equality, democracy, multicultural, rainbow.
Transformation shouldn't kind of get a life of its own, because it can also be easy to say we're transforming. But I do see it particularly in the complex situation in South Africa that is politically, socially so complex that we are going to be in a process of transformation for a very long time.
Suffering for the past centuries that are gone, and we are the people that who are today, for instance in South Africa, were the people who are called upon more often to reconcile.
The weight of conditions for artists in the past is so heavy that it just hasn't been dealt with, on the same level as like political events,
I mean, how, if you can't raise those issues, then what are we doing as artists?
I think a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Arts would be an excellent idea.
And for the first time, I'm really enjoying being a practicing artist again, like I used to be in London, So I don't really want to take on the whole of the white world here, the academic fine arts white world.
You know, institutions don't necessarily have the resources, but is that enough? You know, there has to be a way. One has to find sponsorship. There maybe just has to be a different way of strategizing around these issues to make it possible.
Politically, I lived my life in politics and as an activist, and when I paint from my soul.
I would say the only color that the artist should really worry about should be the colors in his box, in his paint box.
So you always have to think. You never forget you're a woman. And you never forget you're black.
A strategy might be, to not let being a black person or being a black artist to be the only thing that will drive you, because you might have other experiences outside of just being a black person.
That I wasn't so much against the institution, but I was very much against the people that come from the institution that would push their degree or their qualifications in my face to subjugate me and other people like me who come from the street. But now today I'm so proud to say that the street is a university on its own. And maybe I'm now becoming like them and push it in their face and say, hey man, I have an HPD degree in streetology.
It's all to do with, oh no, look, it's Lalita again. Oh gosh, it's Vuyile. Oh, David Kolwani. Oh my God, what do we do with these black artists?
So in a way, it's the same old thing. If you give a baboon a freedom, you take it out of the cage, you chain it, you put a long pole so it can go up and sit on top of the pole and go down and run around, but go nowhere.
I want to be dealt with as a South African black artist, but who has lived his life in a racist situation, right? And that is how I want my work to be seen and appreciated from that point of view, from that context.
My concern is still with cultural issues and political issues, social issues, and for me there is also time to paint flowers, and talk about love, talk about beauty.
So that's South Africa. It's our South Africa.